This is the Singer 628 model Touch Sew Deluxe Zig-Zag sewing machine. It's a really sturdy machine. I love it. When this machine came to me, the wheel was not engaging the bobbin at all. So the upper vertical gear was broken. I'm going to link to that part in the description below. I do recommend replacing all of the gears because only after using it a few times after replacing that gear, another gear fell apart. So I'm going to link to the full set that I bought. And I'm going to link to a Singer website page with all the 628 parts that you can buy for this machine. Woman Heather was able to help me identify the gear I needed to replace. So I'm going to provide a link to that full page for this model sewing machine and replaceable parts in the description below. I'm also linking below to the free manual on my website. It's a very thorough, detailed manual that covers all the places on the machine that you're supposed to oil. We're going to cover 1, taking the outer pieces apart so that you can replace the gears. 2, replacing the gears. 3, making sure that your self-winding bobbin is put back together properly, because to replace all of the gears, you have to remove a part attached to the self-winding bobbin. There were some loose pieces in the top of my machine, so I'm going to show you where I put those pieces back. I couldn't find a video on how to do any of this, so I did this myself, also with the help of my husband. There was a spring and a plastic tab just sitting in the top of the machine. I'm going to show you where I placed those so that now the left, center, right lever works and the stitch width lever works. I'm going to cover where to oil this machine based upon the manual. We're going to go over the timing. I'm also going to link to a video I always refer to for timing. He fixes sewing machines professionally, and really he does the absolute best job, in my opinion, of showing you how to fix the timing. But I am going to show you a picture and go over the timing. And then lastly, we're going to thread the machine. We're going to wind the bobbin. We're going to make sure it works. And sew a few stitches. Everything is separated into chapters. There is a time code in the description also if you just want to skip to something. Materials for this are a micro screwdriver, a regular flathead screwdriver, the replacement gears, sewing machine oil, an Allen wrench. I also recommend having a magnet so that you can catch your gear, or you can reach the gear if it falls. And also you will want to find any broken pieces that are inside the machine and take them out. A magnet can come in really handy for that. And a socket wrench. If the machine is on, turn the machine off and unplug the power cord. We're going to start with the very front of the machine. There's a decal. Just pop the decal off. After that, starting from the bottom, making sure the levers are out of the way, just gently pop the front off. There are tabs along the top. Remove any loose pieces from the top. Now you're going to open the built-in stitch chart and remove the 1 screw to the right. Next, make sure the take-up lever is down, and then open the threading chart panel to the left and slide the top to the left. Now use your flathead screwdriver to unscrew the feet. As you are replacing gears, you're going to use the inside diameter to determine the gear that is replacing the old gear. The inside diameter is different for the various gears, and the timing gear actually has 2 screws. Now remove the screw from the metal housing from the top right of the bottom of the machine. Next, pop out the plastic socket. You're going to have to use that hole to remove the timing bar. This is the timing gear. It has 2 screws. You don't have to take the screws out completely, but you have to use the Allen wrench to loosen them so you can remove it from the rod. Now loosen the gear screw on the other end of the timing rod. Now you're going to slide the timing rod to the right through the socket hole. You'll notice on the timing rod that the left side has a flat edge where the left gear's screw butts up against that flat edge. Now you're going to turn the machine upright and loosen the screw in the upper vertical gear. This is the upper vertical gear that we replaced. To loosen the screw on the upper vertical gear, you're going to go through the front of the machine. And there's only 1 screw on the upper vertical gear. Here's where using a magnetic stick can come in handy. If you can get the magnetic stick on that upper vertical gear, you can then turn the machine on its side and pull the vertical rod out from the bottom. And since we're not replacing the upper vertical gear that we just replaced, he's putting it back on the rod to keep things organized. This piece is directly connected to the self-winding bobbin lever. You're going to take your micro flathead screwdriver and loosen the screw on the upper right of that metal cylinder. For the next gear, there is a nut at the bottom of the gear. And in order to remove that, you have to use your socket wrench. And you have to turn in a clockwise direction because it's a reverse thread nut. What Doug's doing here is he's using the Allen wrench in the gear's screw to brace the gear and keep it in place as he loosens the nut on the bottom. The nut comes off first. Then the bar underneath the nut comes off. And then the washer, which has a little tab on it that goes into the hole at the bottom of the gear. Now Doug's loosening the screw on the gear so he can remove the gear. Doug has gone ahead and put that gear where its final placement is going to be. It's kind of loose right now, but it's behind the final gear and it's where it's supposed to be when the timing rod goes in. The rod that the final gear goes over does have a flat edge where the gear's screw butts up against it. So you have to be sure that you put the gear on with the screw area facing the flat side. Now we're going to put the washer back on. It has a flat tab on the side that goes into the hole in the bottom of the gear, and it's oblong shaped. Because of its oblong shape, it goes on a certain way onto the rod, and then you have to spin the gear to insert the tab into the hole in the bottom of the gear. Then we put that pin back on it. There is a spring inside the hole where the pin is inserted. This is connected to the self-winding bobbin. And then we replace the nut at the bottom of the gear. And it has a lip that goes towards the gear, and it is reverse thread, so in order to tighten it down, you have to turn it counterclockwise. When you tighten this nut down, do it just loosely. It's directly connected to the self-winding bobbin. If it's too tight, the self-winding bobbin won't work properly. We're going to revisit that in a moment. One thing we're not showing you here, so after you place the gear back on the rod, go ahead and tighten the screw down. What Doug's doing here is he is pushing on the self-winding bobbin lever from the other side of the machine to really push that pin through and get it closer to us so he can put that part back on with the tiny screwdriver. Now Doug is replacing the gear at the very bottom of the vertical rod. And again, the screw butts up against the flat side of the rod. Now he is inserting the rod, and at the same time he has to match up the flat side of the top of the rod with the screw side of the upper vertical gear. So is probably the trickiest part to this, because he's got to get the gear lined up at the top of the machine. He has to make sure that the rod is properly seated in the gear before he can then tighten down the upper vertical gear screw. He's turning the wheel right now to make sure that the gears are lined up and everything's moving properly before he tightens the screw down. Once that gear is in place, he's going to go through the same hole in the front of the machine to tighten the screw down. Now Doug is sliding the timing rod through the right side opening and inserting it first into the timing gear and then through to the left side gear, making sure that the flat side of the timing rod matches up with the screw side of the left side gear. Now he's just making sure that the screws are tightened down on all of the gears except for the timing gear, because we need that one loose to set the timing. Right now he's making sure that the gears aren't too pushed up against each other, but they're also not too loose. There needs to be a fluidity so everything moves easy. Now we're putting the plastic socket back in place, making sure that entire area is properly seated in the machine before putting the metal housing back on top and bolting it in. Now Doug has revisited the final gear. It should be able to move. It should be able to move in and out like you see here. He's had to loosen that nut because this is the mechanism that engages the self-winding bobbin. So that lever, when pushed to the left from the top, raises the bobbin casing. And when you close the slide plate, it disengages the self-winding bobbin. By going back and slightly loosening and slightly tightening this nut at the bottom of the gear, and also making sure that the lever is in the right place, by taking the micro flathead screwdriver and making these adjustments, we can see that the nut being too tight at the bottom of the gear will render the self-winding bobbin useless. We went back and forth making adjustments until it was working properly. And you can see it working from the bottom of the machine as well. This is what it's supposed to look like. When you press the lever to the left, the bobbin case rises. And that's what it looks like when you close the slide plate. It'll disengage. The slide plate pushes the lever back into the sewing position and the bobbin case drops. Here we are setting the timing. There's a certain gentleman's video we always refer to. He's a professional. He shows you how to adjust the timing on a Singer sewing machine. We watch his videos and then it's trial and error from there. Doug is adjusting the timing rod from below to get the bobbin case in a very specific position. There's a point at which you see that the needle just misses a metal area of the casing. And then as the needle is moving upwards, it's at just the right moment for catching thread on the bobbin. Hopefully between those two videos, you'll be able to adjust your timing perfectly. Once he's happy with the placement, then he has to very carefully turn the machine over without moving the timing rod and set those two screws. And he also has to make sure that the gears are flush against each other. So it was a time-consuming process for him to get the rod where he wanted it and make sure the gears are close together, not too tight, not too loose, and then tighten those last two screws. I started oiling the machine at the bottom so that I could immediately put the bottom cover back on. Again, the free manual that you can download at my website, link is in the description, shows you exactly where on the machine to oil it. I'm just going through this very quickly, but the manual is amazingly detailed. The illustrations are very good, so there's no question what parts of the machine need to be oiled. After you oil the bottom area of the machine, you can put the bottom cover back on. It's a little hard to see all of the spots that I'm getting to, and there are more spots to oil than what I'm showing you. So again, I encourage you to download the manual and just study the illustrations. You just refer to it and you'll be able to do it easy. When this machine came to me, this spring and this plastic tab were laying in the top of the machine, completely loose. This is connected to the needle placement, left, center, right lever, and also the stitch width lever. There is an illustration in the manual. It's not as clear as I would like, but I was able to place the spring on the left to what you can faintly see is cylindrical, just like maybe a rod. I'm not absolutely certain that's where the spring is supposed to go, but I couldn't find another place to put it. And then I placed the right side of the spring on the metal part, and I placed the tab where it's at, and those levers work now. That's all I know. Again, I couldn't find a video on exactly how to do this, but placing the spring and the plastic tab where they are on my machine, the left, center, right needle placement lever works, and the stitch width lever works. So here I've got a Dritz thread holder on the right. If you had the vertical spool attachment, then you would open the built-in stitch chart and place it there. So we go in through the very top. And then move on to the metal button. If you open the threading chart on the left, it's a little door that swings open. It actually has visual instructions for how to thread the machine, but the manual also has very detailed instructions. If you look closely, there are actually 3 parallel discs behind the tension knob. If you're concerned about where you are putting the thread, a really good test is to check the tension. So pull your thread through and turn it all the way to the right for 0 and all the way to the left for 9. When the tension is really loose, 0, you'll be able to pull the thread through very easy. But if you turn it all the way to the right to 9, it will be very tight, very hard to get through. And forgive me, I switched to black thread here because I already have a bobbin with blue thread. Now we're going to go through the take-up lever, and then 3 metal tabs on the way down. And then thread our needle. I like to make sure that the empty bobbin is really tight, otherwise thread can get caught in the seam between the 2 pieces. If you find that adding the bobbin casing is a little tricky, I've found a spot on the machine where the needle is on the way up and the gap for the lower casing is at the very bottom, as you can see. I find that's the easiest place to add the casing. It doesn't seem to fit very easily from any other position. And then I add this metal tab that I have to hold down with my finger because it does not stay in place. We want to make sure that our needle is set to center and that our stitch width is set to 1. Insert your empty bobbin, press the self-winding bobbin lever to the left. You will not be lowering the presser foot, and take loose thread from your needle and wind it around the bolt. There's a bolt next to your needle. We ended up having to adjust the self-winding bobbin several times. And I also had a little bit of trouble with my multi-purpose black thread. So I switched to a better, sturdier, high-quality thread, and it was perfectly fine. And in fact, after I did that, I was able to finally wind my black thread bobbin. And yeah, I just love the stitching, and hopefully I can get a lot of use out of it. The manual walks you through all the parts that you need to clean, how you clean them. There's a ton of information. This is a huge manual. You can sew with 2 strands of thread and 2 needles. If you buy the accessories, there are many fashion discs for different types of stitching. I'm just going to play on this machine and have fun. And If I do anything I think is really, really cool, I'll make another video. Thank you so much for following this tutorial with me. I hope it has been helpful. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. You can always comment here, but you can also send me emails at lydiahawk.com. Just go to the contact page. If there's anything that you would like to see that you can't find, let me know. Happy sewing!